Okay, so I've taken on board that you'd prefer to have the kind of theory parts of the lessons delivered away from the lesson so you can do it at home. So just going to finish off the first bit that we've been looking at on what a strategy is, how we come up with a strategy, and the different types of strategies, and then we're going to look at SWOT and PEST analysis. So first of all, let's look at how we actually come up with or develop a strategy. So a business has to decide on the type of strategy it will use. It comes from internal and external factors. It comes from deciding on the goals that need to be achieved and analysing the business's position. So thinking about where the business wants to be, so where APSL wants to be and how it's going to get there. So where it wants to be is the overall long-term objective or the mission statement. How it's going to get there is the strategy. So as I say, we will look at internal and external factors. That's where the SWOT analysis and the PEST analysis comes in. So some of the strategies will be at a functional level, so that's what we briefly touched upon, to improve the efficiency of their business operations, for instance. There might be generic strategies which are designed to improve the way that the business compete against its rivals in an industry, or a business might consider strategies designed to compete on a global scale. Or a corporate strategy might be aimed at the long-term development of the organisation. So we're going to just finish off looking at the functional strategies, and I will talk about business level strategies and corporate strategies, but only very briefly because that's something that Ms. Henderson looks at. So let's look at, as I say, first of all, functional or operational strategies. So these are designed to improve the efficiency of a business's operations. So they often focus on one area, such as production methods or marketing, human resources or research and development. So the 4 functional areas basically. But in order for them to be effective, they have to involve cooperation between all the different functions. So some examples might be, as a functional strategy, you might try to or want to achieve economies of scale. So for example, a business will try to reduce its delivery costs if they use one large van to make one journey rather than 3 small vans making 3 trips. A functional objective might be to try and introduce lean production. So if you remember that from last year, it might mean just-in-time manufacturing so that a business does not need to receive materials until they are needed to save on storage costs and speed up production process. So both of those so far could definitely apply to APSL. Another functional strategy could be to introduce total quality management. So for example, giving work groups responsibility for solving quality problems during the process. This will reduce the amount of wasted final products. Another functional strategy could be to try and match consumers' needs better through market research or through better market research. Another one might be improving customers' response through better distribution channels or making better use of distribution channels. It might be that we try to improve staff motivation with rewards or through recognition. It might be that we try to accurately forecast the need for staff and the loss of staff, so human resource planning from last year. It might be that we try to actually improve our staff through training. It might be that we have a functional strategy of encouraging better market research or better development or innovation. Or it might simply be to improve our waste management. As a functional strategy, that's definitely something that APSL should be looking at or could well be looking at. So, just to remind you, I'll just put them down in shorthand. So it might be things like economies of scale. It might be things like lean production or total quality management. Or it might be market research, distribution, motivation, training, or waste management. So any of those we could class as being functional strategies. As I said, I'll briefly go through what business level strategies and corporate strategies could be as well. So a business level strategy is a plan that a company uses to gain a competitive advantage over its rivals in the market. You might also hear these called generic strategies, or Porter's generic strategies, because the guy called Michael Porter came up with a book in which he suggested that these take place. We say that they're generic because all firms can use them, whether they're in manufacturing or services. It is unlikely that a business can serve an entire market all of the time because competition exists. So consumers have a choice whether to buy a rival's product or not to buy a product at all. Firms therefore do have to decide which parts of the market to aim at and how to be distinct from their competitors. So as I said, Michael Porter came up with these ideas of generic strategies, and he suggested that there are 3 generic strategies that could be used to gain advantage. So number 1, he said, was, just trying to remember, cost leadership. So this is where a business tries to produce goods or service at a lower cost than its competitors. So an example might be Ryanair or EasyJet or Aldi or Netto or Lidl, somewhere like that. So they try to offer standard or adequate products, average products, medium products. So they're not luxury products, they're not inferior, they're just normal goods. Or they try to do something called differentiation. This is where the business tries to make a product that is seen as unique. So that because they're unique, because they have a unique selling point, it means that they can charge a premium price, so higher than other people. So an example of that might be Amiga watches. It's still a watch, but they differentiate by being of a higher quality. And another business level strategy, that's the worst arrow anyone has ever drawn, could be focus. So this is where business concentrates on a particular segment or a consumer group. So it tries to identify or anticipate the needs of what this group will have. So the segment could be a geographical area or a certain income type. But once it has been chosen, it might the business might then choose to take a low cost or a cost leadership approach or a differentiation approach. So if you remember, in this bit here, that's where I've talked about potential functional strategies. These were potential business level strategies. So remember, cost leadership, differentiation and focus. Now let's very briefly look at potential corporate strategies. So this is already a word we've come across, this idea of corporate, excuse me. But corporate strategy is aimed at the long-term position of the business. So a company might consider where they want to be in 10 years' time and how they're going to get there. So should it expand, for instance? If so, how are they going to do it? What direction are they going to expand? These are all likely to be long-term decisions which will affect the entire organisation. And that's what we mean by corporate. When we're talking about the entire organisation, that's what we mean by corporate. So there are a variety of methods which corporate strategic development can be achieved. So corporate strategies. So it might be internal development. So this is where the, let's write that down. So one corporate strategy could be internal development. So where the business grows by increasing sales or output or profit over a given period of time. In some ways, internal development can be seen as the least risky corporate strategy. But corporate structure would still have to change. Corporate culture, would have to change, and structures might have to change within the business to meet the new requirements. But it can do that organically. So it doesn't have to change instantly overnight. It can change slowly. Remember, the word organic means like an organism grows slowly. But one of the disadvantages is that the business may not have all the necessary technology or people or skills to implement this new strategy. So it might take a long time for the business to grow. This means that it might not fit in with the overall organisational objectives. Another corporate strategy could be takeovers, mergers and acquisitions. So this involves companies joining together to form one new single organisation. A merger is when two companies of relatively equal size join to become another new company. A takeover or an acquisition usually involves a larger company buying a smaller company. As a corporate strategy, this does have a number of benefits. An organisation may be able to introduce new products and services quickly by buying a business that is already set up to deliver such a product. Businesses therefore can expand using an existing company, so very quickly, but that means that they can get economies of scale because they're now bigger, so possibly they could buy in bulk. A business may get access to new customers, new products, new markets, better technology, better expertise, better brands, and new retail or manufacturing sites as well. Takeovers and mergers, though, are still risky. They may be resisted, so employees might not want to be taken over. Shareholders might not want to be taken over. So employees of companies that are taken over might be hostile. This could result in demotivation or workforce not being very productive. It also might lead to organisational difficulties. So there might be 2 people in a manager's role. There might be 2 people who are responsible for training, in which case we're going to have to get rid of some people. Some larger companies have attempted to demerge or divest themselves, so get rid of part of their business. This allows them to focus on their core products. It may be that 2 separate companies might operate more effectively or more efficiently than one large one. And the third way, or the third different type of corporate strategy, could be some kind of alliance, or what the technical term is a collaborative strategy. So a collaborative strategy or an alliance. So collaborative strategies and alliances are when businesses work together for mutual benefit. So they do remain separate businesses though, but sometimes they've formed an arrangement to create a whole new business. So there might be a joint venture or a consortium whereby 2 companies work together because they think that they might be better working together. I'm trying to think of an example. Starbucks sometimes have bookshops in them, don't they? Because Starbucks know that they're good at making coffee. I think is it Waterstones that have them in. Oh, it might be Costa. A coffee company that I am aware of has a tie-in with Waterstones, because Waterstones are good at making or selling books. Costa or whoever are good at selling coffee. So rather than get together and create a new company, they have kind of a joint venture. They have an alliance to have coffee shops with bookshops built in there. So that was a very brief introduction of what we mean by a corporate strategy, which are these things here. Brief introduction to what the business level strategies are, and all of these different ones were functional strategies, so examples of what the functional areas could be trying to achieve. So now what I want you to do before you move on to the next slide is think of just these functional strategies. I want you to think about APSL. What might, out of all of these ones here, what might the functional strategies be? Or could you think of anything else that the business is trying to achieve through specific functional strategies? So don't move on to the next slide until you've thought about that and gone through your case study. So the next topic we have to look at is this idea of business analysis. So if you remember a couple of minutes ago I was talking about how a functional strategy has to be based on something where the business is at, and then the strategy is how we're going to get to where we want to be. So before we can decide where we want to be, we have to think about where we're at, and business analysis helps us decide where we're at. So it's the examination of how, what and why of business activity. So it might involve analysing the possible internal problems and advantages that APSL has by the means of what we call an internal audit. It might also examine the factors external to APSL that could affect its strategy by means of an external audit. The outcome of these analyses should be to find the organisation's strengths and its capabilities, so what it could be good at, its commercial and operational advantages, and wider general pressures and constraints on the business. Businesses have a number of methods to carry these out, and that's what we're going to look at now. So SWOT we're going to look at first. So SWOT analysis is a method that a business can use to decide where it is at. So it looks at internal strengths and weaknesses and external opportunities and threats. Now this was something that I taught you last year, but just to remind you, the way to remember the difference between internal and external is very easy. If the business can control the factor, it is internal. If the business has to react to the factor, then it is external. So the business can't control what the levels of taxes are that they have to pay, so therefore it must be external. A business can control the wages that it pays its staff, therefore that is internal. So as I've said, firms perform audits to decide what factors are influencing them. So an internal audit looks at things within the company that could or should have an impact on decision making and the potential future strategic direction. There's my mistake for the day, that's obviously should be direction. So for the SW, so the internal strengths and weaknesses of the SWOT, this is what the audit might look like. This is what we might class as an internal audit. No idea why this has come up here, but just ignore that, it should be up there. So, as usual, when we perform these type of things, we have to look at the 4 functional areas. So, what about, now these are just examples, but what about labour turnover? Is our labour turnover in APSL, do we know about it? If we do, is it a strength or is it a weakness? Motivation, is it high or is it low? Absenteeism, again, high or low? Productivity, are we making lots of products per hour or per week or per month, per person? Are we not making very many at all? What's our marketing like? Are our sales high or are they low? Is our advertising particularly good or do we need to improve it? What's our brand name like? Do people respect our brand name or is it something we need to improve? How good's our promotion? Do people find out about the products that we're selling? Production, linking back to human resources, how productive are we? How good are we at delivering our products? What's our stock control like? Are we holding lots of stock? Do we not hold any stock at all? Do we have finished materials? What's our quality like? Is it something that our customers expect? Could it be improved? Is it too high? Does it mean that our prices are too high? In production, we might also want to add, what's our waste management like? I'm sure Percy would have something to say about that. And what about finance then? So what are our budgets like? Do we have a strong budgeting or are we not very good at budgeting? Are all our variances positive or are they negative? Favourable or adverse? What's our profitability like? That's where the ratios that you've been doing Miss Henderson looks at. Same with cash flow. Investment appraisal is something you'll come on to do with Miss Henderson. But if we're buying something, will it pay us back? So that's what we mean by an internal audit. So we've looked at all of these 4 functional areas in the business, and I've broken it down into 4 areas in each of them. And once you've gone through them, you can decide what are we good at and what aren't we so good at. So what are APSL good at? What could they regard as a strength? And what things aren't they so good at that they need to improve on? As I've said, I've given you some examples of what will fall into the SW of the SWOT. So as you can see, I've always broken them down into 4 functional areas. The internal audit, therefore, will be used to assess the strength and weaknesses of a business. It is also used to provide accurate information about each department or function. The best internal audits provide up-to-date accounting and statistical information. There's another mistake as usual. That obviously should just be EG, not egg. Cash flow and labour turnover. The business should compare or benchmark itself with major competitors. Benchmarking purely means you're comparing with facts and figures from someone else. So we've looked at the SW. Now let's look at the OT of SWOT. So an external audit looks at the OT parts of SWOT. The business needs to be aware of the constantly changing environment that it operates in. A business is going to be useless if it takes no account of what's happening outside its 4 walls. It can't hope to be successful if it doesn't look outside at its competitors, at what its customers are doing, what the government is doing. So the business needs to consider the implications of this changing environment and take steps to deal with it, to develop a strategy, and that's how we're linking back. So yes, we're looking at our strengths and weaknesses, our opportunities and threats, But the whole point behind that is because we want to develop a strategy in order to be successful. A great way of thinking of what a SWOT analysis is like the green cross code. When you were younger, this is how you were taught to cross the road. So you look left, you look right, you look left again, then you walk across the road, and then you get run over because you've ignored the fact there was a car there. So the green cross road won't save you from getting run over. The green cross code will make you aware of whether it's dangerous or not to cross. So a SWOT analysis doesn't make your business successful. A SWOT analysis makes you aware of what you're good at and what you're not so good at, so you can put things in place to make sure that you're successful. Never fall into the trap of thinking a SWOT analysis makes a business successful. It doesn't. It helps the business to decide what it needs to do in order to become successful, or what it needs to avoid in order to be not successful. So an external audit. So external audit in the middle, and these are all the things that we need to be looking at. So ethics. Do people think that we are an ethical business? I think it's quite appropriate for APSL. Certainly, Percy won't necessarily think they're an ethical business. What about technology and technological change? Are we making the most of that? Or is that something that's going to have a negative impact on us because we're going to have to buy new machinery or new computers? Or is it something that we're really good at and means that we're better than our competitors? What influence might the European Union have on us? Do we already sell to the European Union, in which case you could argue it's a strength? Or could there be lots of competitors who we're going to be exposed to because of the EU, in which case that's a weakness? What about economic issues? So for instance, economic issues for Aldi recently has been a massive opportunity because they sell cheaper brands. But as the economic issues change and we come out of a recession, so people tend to have a little bit more money, might that now become a threat to Aldi? Because people have a little bit more money, might they go back to places like Tesco? The customer themselves, are they an opportunity to us? Do we have lots of customers who keep coming back? Or are they a threat? Do we not have many customers who haven't really heard of us and might not want to use us? Social issues. So do we think that do we think that fashions and fads are going to help us, or are they going against us? Well, one of the potential ones, which links to environmental issues at the moment, is people are very interested in what businesses do to support the environment. If it gets out about what's happening without the situation with Percy, would that be a threat to us? Political influence. Could it be that, for instance, a political party is trying to help out business, in which case that would be good for us, it would be an opportunity? Or could it be that they're trying to bring in new laws to stop fly tipping, in which case that would be an even bigger threat to us? Culture links in with social issues, I think. Pressure groups. So if we're being supported by environmental pressure groups, that's an opportunity. If we're being threatened, if we're being told that if we don't clean up our act, we're going to be named and shamed, there's a threat. And what are our competitors like? If they're poor, if they're old-fashioned, if their quality is very poor, then that's an opportunity for us to try and steal their competitors. On the other hand, if they make excellent quality goods cheaply, there's a massive threat for us. So as you can see, the external factors, so these things above, of the SWOT analysis fit into the PEST framework. So the PEST factors, in addition to the rest of the factors from the external audit, need to go into the OT section of a SWOT analysis. Don't panic if you don't know what I mean by PEST, or you can't remember what PEST is, because we're going to talk about that in a second. You can also look to include factors from Ansoff's matrix as well into the external factors, into the external audit, sorry. So remember, internal audit tells us what our strengths and weaknesses are, and the external audit tells us what our opportunities and threats are. Please don't forget though, they're only useful, this SWOT is only useful if we actually do something with it. So remember, I will always try to tell you what could come up with in terms of analysis or evaluation for these topics. Excuse me. So when looking at SWOT analysis, is it possible to consider any of the elements that might affect a firm in relation to its future plans? So for example, having investigated the threat posed by competition, a business may decide to undertake market research to find a new niche in the market. This would be a costly exercise, but it could secure the business's profits as a result. Similarly, the expectation of boom demand could encourage a firm to undertake investment and training in order to improve efficiency. So what we're saying is, if we have a strength, what opportunity could we take because of it? If we have a weakness, what threats might emerge because of it? So we've got to link our strengths and opportunities and weaknesses and threats so that we actually do something about it. That's the key. What will the business do? What will APSL do because of its SWOT analysis? And then an evaluation. So this can be achieved by looking at the short and long term effects of strategic planning. There's that thing again, always short and long term. Or by considering and ranking, same again, a series of implications. So for example, a firm might feel that there is going to be a decline in demand for its products as a result of its new strategic plan. As a consequence, it might decide to allow natural wastage, so people leaving, to reduce its workforce and delay decisions to expand. These actions might help the business cope with reduced demand in the long term, although in the short term, implications, especially among staff, might create problems. That would be a great evaluative statement to say how SWOT analysis has impacted APSL. So they've seen that something's going to happen. So what we're saying here is demand might fall. So what they've done is, because of that, they've allowed natural wastage to reduce the workforce. But an impact of this in the long term could be that the business can cope with reduced demand, but in the short term, staff might create problems. That's a great way of breaking down long term, short term, positives and negatives. So just to recap then, the purpose of a SWOT analysis excuse me, is to conduct a general and quick examination of a business's current position so that it can identify preferred and likely directions for the future. So a SWOT analysis involves looking at the internal strengths and weaknesses of a business and the external opportunities and threats. So in terms of strengths, these are the things that the business and its staff can do. So things that they're effective at, things that they are well known for, things that make them money, things that generate business and good reputation, things that lead to confidence in the market, things that cause customers to come back for repeat business, or things that cause other businesses to try and learn from them, to benchmark from them. It also looks at internal weaknesses. So these are the things that the business does badly, that it is effective at, or that it has a poor reputation for. It also includes the factors that cause losses or hardships or disputes, grievances and complaints for a business. On the external side, we need to think about opportunities. These are the directions that the business could profitably take in the future because of its strengths, or because it eliminates or gets rid of one of its weaknesses. This involves a consideration of the business environment from the widest and most creative possible standpoints. So we need to take in as much as we can. This is where that phrase thinking outside the box comes from. So what could possibly be an opportunity that we could take as a business? And then the final external could be threats to a business that arise from the activities of competitors, often failing to take opportunities or to build on success. Threats also come from complacency or a lack of focus, or from falling profits, perhaps due to rising costs. These analyses are often carried out as what we call a brainstorming session. This is a very effective way of gathering and categorizing information, illustrating particular matters and generating interest in the business and activities quickly. The result of such an exercise may provide a basis on which more detailed analysis can be conducted, but a SWOT analysis is often used as a method to kind of come up with those original ideas to build on and to come up with our strategies from. So just to give you an example, this could be for Coca-Cola, for instance, or Pepsi, Lucozade, a soft drinks manufacturer. So an internal strength in the business, or a strong point in the business, could be that their products are market leaders. It could be that they have good brand loyalty. It could be that they are flexible. They have a flexible workforce. One of their weaknesses could be the product life cycle, that all of their products are coming to the decline stage, for instance. It could be that we have a very narrow product portfolio. So we have only fizzy sugary drinks, for instance, and we're not tapping into a potential health kick, for instance. Opportunities might mean expanding into new markets. So as I've just mentioned there, something like into healthy drinks. It really is difficult writing with your finger on an iPad screen, so please forgive me. An opportunity could be that there's simply more demand at the moment for these type of drinks. And a threat could be supermarkets. They want to sell our products at a much lower price to try and make as much profit as possible, so that could impact our profitability. And legislation could be another one, because the government might want to try and restrict the amount of sugar in drinks, for instance. So that's just a nice little example of what we're going to do as SWOT analysis. And if you remember, I said that a lot of the things that come into the opportunities and threats fall into what we called a PEST analysis. So let's have a look at that. So a PEST analysis examines the external environment, so that's why it's the O and the T of SWOT, and the global factors that might influence the business. So it can provide a quick and visual representation of the external pressures facing a business and the possible impacts or the possible constraints on a strategy. So it usually falls into these categories. It's the most important thing isn't which category it falls into. The important thing is that we actually think about it. So don't ever think, oh, is it political, is it economic? As long as you think about it, that's the important bit. So political. So there's the P. So this is concerned with how political developments regionally, nationally and internationally might affect a business's strategy. So it could include a consideration of laws, for instance, or regulation, such as control on energy companies at the moment. It could be political pressures, such as the government's view of certain activities. So for instance, the Conservatives have a totally different outlook on how business should be run to the Labour Party. So it could be that the Labour Party want to increase the public sector. So teachers and nurses, there might be more of those under a Labour government, whereas the Conservative government think that private business is better. So that could be something that could be an opportunity for us. If you provide private healthcare, that could be good for you if a Conservative government comes in, for instance. The E is for economic. So this might involve the analysis of a wide range of economic factors and their effects on a business. So they might include consumer activity. So things like So it might include things like how confident consumers are. If you're thinking you're going to lose your job tomorrow, there's a good chance you won't spend very much money. So that could be a threat. It could be things like spending patterns or willingness to spend. It might be something that we call economic variables. These are things like inflation, unemployment, trade and growth. Now don't panic too much about those, because we do come on to economic variables, same as the next one. Another economic variable could be the government policy. So this is fiscal and monetary policy, exchange rates. That's all I'm going to say, because you'll start panicking, but we do a whole section on that. But basically, how will the government and what the government does impact on our economy? It might be things like the fixed costs or the variable costs of the business. It might be the effect of changes in product and labour markets. So labour markets, it's no different to how the market for cars works. So supply and demand. If there's more labour supplied than is required, then wages will fall. And if there's not enough labour, then wages will go up. How will that impact our business? So for example, in a recession, demand for many products and services tend to fall. So business may also need to analyse the possible effect on their plans of government policy designed to lift the economy out of recession. The S stands for social. So what competitive advantage might a business gain by social changes taking place outside of their business? So for example, after the year 2000, the UK had a falling birth rate, an increasing life expectancy, and therefore an ageing population. This has led to the development of products, particularly private pensions, private medical schemes, sheltered housing, and third age holidays aimed at older age groups. So my dad gets particular holiday brochures aimed at him, aimed at specific destinations where someone of his age might want to go. Pressure groups can also affect businesses. So I'll put down pressure groups, or just pressure, and I'll put down demographics. That's not bad writing on the screen like that. Pressure groups can also affect business then. So the anti-smoking lobby or pressure group has led to smoke-free areas in restaurants and hotels and on aircraft. You can't smoke indoors basically now, can you? T stands for technology. So businesses operate, especially now, in a world of rapid technological change. Organisations need to review regularly the impact of new technologies upon what they do. So products can become obsolescent, so they can become out of date very quickly, and production methods can also become out of date. Communication may become inefficient as ICT develops. New markets might open. So for example, some music companies have totally ignored selling via the internet. So HMV, for instance, they totally forgot about the internet. That's why they ended up in the situation that they're in. Think about Blockbuster. It doesn't exist anymore because they didn't think quickly enough about distributing via the internet. The one that, so I'll just write there, change. The one that you sometimes see, so that's obviously stands for PEST. Sometimes you might see it included G as well. I don't always include it because I think it often comes under social as well. But G stands for green. So environmental factors that might have an effect on business. So things to do with pollution, methods of production, how our methods of production might impact the environment. So things like deforestation, or if you're a mine, how that might influence the local area, or how the image and the landscape of an area is affected by a new factory, for instance. So let's recap then. So we're looking at this idea of we started off looking at functional strategies. So these are the things that we've said. We know what our mission statement is. We know what we want to achieve. A functional strategy is how an individual part of the business can achieve it. Then we said before we know what strategy to put in place, we have to decide where we're at now. Where we're at now is done by doing a SWOT analysis. So the SWOT analysis is broken down into S and W for internal strengths and weaknesses, and O and T for external opportunities and threats. We said internal, we know it's internal because we can control it. and we said that we should make use of our strengths to match an opportunity, or we should make sure that we avoid our weaknesses so it doesn't become a threat. We said that we get the opportunities and threats from the external environment, and to make sure that we think of enough things to go in there, we use our PEST analysis. So the PEST analysis feeds into the O and the T of the SWOT analysis. And then just to recap again, just to stress to you, a PEST analysis or a SWOT analysis are useless on their own. They're not going to make your business successful. You have to use them in conjunction with something else in order to come up with a strategy. That's what makes your business successful. SWOT analysis and PEST analysis on their own won't. What SWOT analysis and PEST analysis make you do is what will make you successful.